Good evening, and welcome back to another reading of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. This being A Christmas Carol in prose, being a ghost story of Christmas by Charles Dickens with 4 illustrations in color and 4 woodcuts by John Leech. A facsimile of the original edition with the introduction by J.K. Chesterton and a preface by B.W. Matz, London Cecil Palmer Oakley House, Bloomsbury Street, WC1. We are starting on Stave 3, Part 4 tonight. And we have just hit the point here where Scrooge will enter his nephew's house. Now, if you want to skip ahead in the video and just go straight to the story, I understand completely. Please feel free to jump ahead to what I have written here. If not, you are more than welcome to stay for the history, facts, and opinions portion of the video, which will be starting now. So either jump ahead or stop the video and listen in when I pick this book back up again. I apologize because I've been a couple of days late on uploading, but that's because Stave 3 Part 1 actually deleted itself and all of the footage from my phone, which I have been recording on. So I apologize because I had to go and refilm all of that, and I wanted to post that before posting the other portions. Now, I have been reading this every single night, and I have been recording it every single night, so I just ask for a little bit of patience for uploading. My apologies again, but technology is only so good as technology does, and humans only be so fast at things. I've also been a little bit behind because my family came to visit for a couple of days, so we were busy having fun with them, and it was a lot of really, really good memories and a lot of good Christmas cheer to be had, which brings me to today's topic of the video is Scrooge's family. Now, we know that he has a nephew and a sister. Now, as mentioned in the previous video, Fan, Scrooge's sister, is a tribute to Charles Dickens' own sister, Fan, or Fanny. However, the nephew for Scrooge is not this person. It is not Charles Dickens' own nephew, who he models after, but one of his brothers. Now, the nephew for Scrooge, Fred, is actually loosely based on Charles Dickens' own younger brother, who the two of them were close up for a time. He lived with Charles at a place called Furnival's Inn in 1834. Now, this was unfortunately due to a time he was estranged from his wife and had to make alimony payments, and it caused him to go into a considerable amount of debt and landed him in an in-debtor's prison, much like Charles and Fred's father. At that point, he also had a rather bad bout with alcoholism, and this thus was a strained relationship for Charles and his brother quite considerably, and his brother ended up dying at the young age of 48. So, unfortunately for Fred, but the nephew seems to be the opposite of all those things. He is loving, he is caring, all he wants to do is spread joy and Christmas cheer throughout the embodiment of the story. So it seemed that almost Charles kind of took all the good qualities of his brother and embodied them in the book and kind of wanted to give a good representation and living memory to that of his brother. So without further ado, we will read Stave 3, Part 4. "Ha ha!" laughed Scrooge's nephew. "Ha ha ha! If you should happen, by any unlikely chance, to know a man more blessed and a laugh than Scrooge's nephew, all I can say is, I should like to know him too. Introduce him to me, and I'll cultivate his acquaintance. It is a fair, even-handed, noble adjustment of things, while there is infection in disease and sorrow. There is nothing in the world so irresistibly contagious as laughter and good humor. When Scrooge's nephew laughed in this way, holding his sides, rolling his head, and twisting his face into the most extravagant contortions, Scrooge's niece by marriage laughed as heartily as he, and their assembled friends, being not a bit behindhand, roared out lustily. "You said that Christmas was a humbug, as I live," cried Scrooge's nephew. "He believed it, too." "More shame for him, Fred," said Scrooge's niece indignantly. "Bless those women. They never do anything by halves. They are always in earnest." She was very pretty, exceedingly pretty, with a dimpled, surprised-looking capital face and a ripe little mouth that seemed made to be kissed. As no doubt it was, all kinds of good little dots about her chin that melted into one another when she laughed, and the sunniest pair of eyes you ever saw in any little creature's head. Altogether, she was what you would have called provoking, you know, but satisfactory, too. Oh, perfectly satisfactory. "He's a comical old fellow," said Scrooge's nephew. "That's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offences carry their own punishment. I have nothing to say against him." "I'm sure he's very rich, Fred," hinted Scrooge's niece. "At least, you always tell me so." "What of that, my dear?" said Scrooge's nephew. "His wealth is of no use to him. He don't do any good with it. He don't make himself comfortable with it. He hasn't the satisfaction of thinking that he is ever going to benefit us with it." "I have no patience with him," observed Scrooge's niece. Scrooge's niece's sisters and all the other ladies expressed the same opinion. "Oh, I have," said Scrooge's nephew. "I am sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him even if I tried, who suffers by his ill whims. Himself, always. Here he takes it to his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? He don't lose much of dinner." "Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner," interrupted Scrooge's niece. Everybody else said the same, and they must be allowed to have been competent judges, because they had just had dinner, and with the dessert upon the table were clustered around by the fire by lamplight. "Well, I'm very glad to hear it," said Scrooge's nephew, "because I haven't any great faith in these young housekeepers. What do you say, Topper?" Topper had clearly got his eye upon one of Scrooge's niece's sisters, for he answered that a bachelor was a wretched outcast, who had no right to express an opinion on the subject, whereat Scrooge's niece's sister, the plump one with the lace tucker, not the one with the roses, blushed. "Do go on, Fred," said Scrooge's niece, clapping her hands. "He never finishes what he begins to say. He's such a ridiculous fellow." Scrooge's nephew revelled in another laugh, and it was impossible to keep the infection off. Though the plump sister tried hard to do it with an aromatic vinegar, his example was unanimously followed. "I was only going to say," said Scrooge's nephew, "that the consequence of his taking a dislike to us and not making merry with us is, as I think, that he loses some pleasant moments, which could do him no harm. I'm sure he loses pleasanter companions than he can find in his own thoughts, either in his mouldy old office or his dusty chambers. I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. I defy him. If he finds me going there in good temper year after year and saying, 'Uncle Scrooge, how are you?' if it only puts him in vain to leave his poor clerk £50, that's something. and I think I shook him yesterday." It was their turn to laugh now, at the notion of his shaking Scrooge. But being thoroughly good-natured and not much caring what they laughed at, so they laughed at any rate, he encouraged them in their merriment, and passed the bottle joyously. After tea they had some music, for they were a musical family, and knew what they were about, when they sung a glee or a catch. I can assure you, especially Topper, who could growl away the bass like a good one, and never swell the large veins in his forehead or get a red in the face over it. Scrooge's niece played well upon the harp, and played among other tunes a simple little air, a mere nothing. You might learn to whistle it in 2 minutes, which had been familiar to the child who fetched Scrooge from the boarding school, as he had been reminded by the ghost of Christmas past. When this strain of music sounded, all the things that the ghost had shown him came upon his mind. He softened more and more, and thought that if he could have listened to it often years ago, he might have cultivated the kindness of life for his own happiness with his own hands, without resorting to the sexton's blade that buried Jacob Marley. But they didn't devote the whole evening to music. After a while they played at forfeits, for it is good to be children sometimes, and never better than at Christmas, when its mighty founder was a child himself. Stop! There was first a game at Blindman's Bluff. Of course I was. And I no more believed Topper was really blind than I believed that he had eyes in his boots. My opinion is that it was a done thing between him and Scrooge's nephew, and that the ghost of Christmas present knew it. The way that he went after that plump sister in the lace tucker was an outrage on the credulity of human nature, knocking down the fire irons, tumbling over the chairs, bumping up against the piano, smothering himself among the curtains. Wherever she went, there he went. He always knew where the plump sister was. He wouldn't catch anybody else. If you had fallen up against him, as some of them did, and stood there, he would have made a feint of endeavoring to seize you, which would have been an affront to your understanding, and would have instantly sidled off in the direction of the plump sister. She often cried out that it wasn't fair, and it really was not. But when at last he caught her, when in spite of all of her silken rustlings and her rapid flutterings past him, he got her into a corner whence there was no escape. Then his conduct was most execrable. For his pretending not to know her, his pretending that it was necessary to touch her headdress, and further to assure himself of her identity by pressing a certain ring upon her finger and a certain chain about her neck, was vile, monstrous. No doubt she told him her opinion of it, then another blind man being in office, as they were so very confidential together behind the curtains. Scrooge's niece was not one of the blind men's bluff party, but was made comfortable with a large chair and footstool in a snug corner, where the ghost and Scrooge were close behind her. But she joined in the forfeits, and loved her love to admiration with all the letters of the alphabet. Likewise at the game of how, when, and where, she was very great, and to the secret joy of Scrooge's nephew beat his sisters hollow. Though they were sharp girls too, as Topper could have told you. There might have been 20 people there, young and old, but they all played, and so did Scrooge, for wholly forgetting in the interest that he had in what was going on, that his voice made no sound in their ears. He sometimes came out with a guess quite loud, and very often guessed right too, for the sharpest needle, best Whitechapel, warranted not to cut in the eye, was not sharper than Scrooge, blunt as he took it in his head to be. The ghost was greatly pleased to find him in this mood, and looked upon him with such favour that he begged like a boy to be allowed to stay until the guest departed. But this the spirit said could not be done. "Here is a new game," said Scrooge. "1 half an hour, spirit, only one." It was a game called Yes and No, where Scrooge's nephew had to think of something, and the rest must find out what, he only answering their questions yes and no, as the case was. The brisk fire of questioning to which he was exposed elicited him that he was thinking of an animal, a live animal, rather a disagreeable animal, a savage animal, an animal that growled and grunted sometimes, and talked sometimes, and lived in London, and walked about the streets, and wasn't made a show of, and wasn't led by anybody, and didn't live in the menagerie, and it was never killed in a market, and was not a horse, or an ass, or a cow, or a bull, or a tiger, or a dog, or a pig, or a cat, or a bear. And every fresh question that was put to him, this nephew burst into a fresh roar of laughter, and was so inexpressibly tickled that he was obliged to get up off the sofa and stamp. At last the plump sister, falling into a similar state, cried out, "I have found it out! I know where it is, Fred! I know where it is!" "What is it?" cried Fred. "It's your Uncle Scrooge!" Which it certainly was. Admiration was the universal sentiment, though some objected that the reply to, "Is it a bear?" ought to have been yes, inasmuch an answer in the negative was sufficient to have diverted their thoughts from Mr. Scrooge, supposing that they had ever had any tendency that way. "He has given us plenty of merriment, I am sure," said Fred, "and would be ungrateful not to drink to his health. Here is a glass of mulled wine ready to our hand at the moment, and I say, Uncle Scrooge." "Well, Uncle Scrooge," they cried. "A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, whatever he is," said Scrooge's nephew. "He wouldn't take it from me, but may he have it, nevertheless. Uncle Scrooge." Uncle Scrooge had imperceptibly become so gay and light of heart that he would have pledged the unconscious company in return, and thanked them in an inaudible speech, if the ghost had given him time. But the whole scene passed off in the breath of the last word spoken by his nephew, and he and the spirit were again upon their travels. Much they saw and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The spirit stood beside sick beds, and they were cheerful, on foreign lands, and they were close at home, by struggling men, and they were patient in their greater hope, by poverty, and it was rich. In almshouse, hospital, and jail, in misery's every refuge, where vain man and his little brief authority had not made fast the door and barred the spirit out, he left his blessing and taught Scrooge his precepts. It was a long night, if it were only a night, but Scrooge had his doubts of this, because the Christmas holidays appeared to be condensed into the space of time they passed together. It was strange, too, that while Scrooge remained unaltered in his outward form, the ghost grew older, clearly older. Scrooge had observed this change, but never spoke of it until they left a children's 12th night party. When looking at the spirit as they stood together in an open place, he noticed that its hair was grey. "Are spirits' lives so short?" asked Scrooge. "My life on this globe is very brief," replied the ghost. "It ends tonight." "Tonight?" cried Scrooge. "Tonight at midnight. Hark! The time is drawing near." The chimes were ringing in 11:15 at that moment. "Forgive me if I am not justified in what I ask," said Scrooge, looking intently at the spirit's robe. "But I see something strange and not belonging to yourself protruding from your skirts. Is it a foot or a claw?" "It might be a claw, for the flesh there is upon it," said the spirit's sorrowful reply. "Look here." From the foldings of its robe it brought 2 children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at its feet and clung upon the outside of its garment. "Oh, man! Look here! Look down here!" exclaimed the ghost. They were a boy and a girl, yellow, meager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, but prostrate too in their humility. Where graceful youth should have filled their features out and touched them with its freshest tints, a stale and shriveled hand like that of age had pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds. Where angels might have sat enthroned, devils lurked and glared out menacing. No change, no degradation, no perversion of humanity in any grade through all the mysteries of the wonderful creation as monsters half so horrible and dread. Scrooge started back, appalled, having them shown to him in this way. He tried to say that they were fine children, but the words choked themselves rather than be parties to a lie of such enormous magnitude. Spirit, are they yours? Scrooge could say no more. They are man's, said the spirit, looking down upon them, and they cling to me, appealing from your fathers. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware them both, in all their degree. But most of all beware this boy, for on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. Deny it, cried the spirit, stretching out its hand towards the city. Slander those who tell it ye, admit it for your factious purposes, and make it worse, and bide the end. Have they no refuge or resource? Cried Scrooge. Are there no prisons? Said the spirit, turning on him for the last time with his own words. Are there no workhouses? The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost and saw it not. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. And that's where we stop for tonight. Stay tuned for tomorrow when we start Stave 4, The Last of the Spirits. Good night.